On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about PropTech. We're going to talk about consolidation, acquisition potentially, the intersection of agents and technology in the future. We've got a lot of exciting stuff to discuss with you. Let's dive in. You talk about it privately, we talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Twiggins, along with my co-host, Keith Robinson, aka Crazy Uncle Keith. Today, we're joined by York Baur, the CEO of MoxiWorks. We're very excited to have him here. York has had a very long career in the tech sector, working in lots of different companies in many different industries. He's been in the real estate space now since about 2012. We're going to talk about how he rappelled down a 40-foot building in Seattle, as well as technology, PropTech, acquisitions, and the intersection of real estate agents and technology in the future. All right, thanks for joining us, York. We're super excited to have you here on the pod. I figured I would start with a super softball question, and that's to tell the listeners about York. Like, what makes you, you know, a little bit about your background and just how you got into this, and some exciting things about, what you think of the industry, et cetera.
But none of the boring stuff.
Yeah, but no boring stuff.
Like how you've wrestled a lion. That's what I want to hear.
Well, firstly, thanks, gents, for having me. Always a pleasure to see you guys. And this is a fun format you guys have concocted here, so well done. So I'll try my best to not be boring, to be colorful.
Yeah, there we go.
By way of background, I came to the industry kind of in a non-traditional way, in the sense that my entire career is in tech, not in real estate. A lot of real estate tech comes from players in real estate, not me. I have a computer science degree. I'm a reforming geek. And Moxie's actually the 13th company I worked for. Came to the company 10 years ago. Only place I've worked longer than 4 years. So, as I like to joke, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm making the Kool-Aid.
So you have commitment issues. That's what we've learned.
Yeah, you do, actually. I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and there was a lot of different positions on your profile.
York Baur has commitment issues. You heard it here first.
There it is.
Well, okay, all right. But if we're going to get colorful, let the record show that I'm also a movie maker. I've made not one, not two, but 3 movies, and they've made money, all of them, which is something a few can say.
There you go.
So if you got any Twilight fans out there, they were about the whole vampire and werewolf phenomenon of the Twilight stories a decade ago. So
interesting.
So ping me on email if you want to learn more on that. Watch them on Amazon. I'm also, as you can tell by my background, I'm also a huge motorcycle guy. So, for what it's worth, that's what I do in my spare time.
What's your brand that you like to ride?
Dude, I got it bad.
Oh God, you have a garage full?
I do. I don't say this in public, so here we go. It's in public now. I have 10 bikes.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Yeah, Harleys and BMWs. I've had a lot of bikes of different flavors, but those are the 2 that are my go-tos.
So, and also a fun fact, I was looking up some stuff online last night. I saw that you scaled a 40-story skyscraper.
What the?
Yes,
you didn't see it, Keith. I did.
So here's, for you gents, here is my pro tip.
And use that word lightly, by the way, because gents is
use it loosely word. In your case, for sure.
Very.
But the pro tip is, don't make commitments for charity giving that you can't fulfill, or that you might have to fulfill if you don't want to. I've done this every year. We have our charitable giving within Moxie, and I always set we set a goal, we reach the goal, and I challenge for a stretch goal, and I say, if we do the goal, I'll do the thing. And this year it was to rappel down our building, which is 40 stories, 500 feet tall here in downtown Seattle.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was watching your face. You were red like a cherry from complete nerves. I mean, I was like, wow. That is
so
ballsy.
Here's the deal. I don't have acrophobia. I don't have clinical fear of heights, but there isn't a human being now that doesn't have some fear of heights.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Your facial expressions were pretty damn funny.
I think the term sphincter tightening experience.
There you go. Yeah, it's like the time I did have a fear of heights, and then my friends gave me 6 Red Bulls and put me on an airplane and went skydiving. That gets rid of your fear of heights in a real hurry. So So there's a little fun fact. All right, let's dive in. Yeah. Let's jump in here. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, and I want to make sure we get some some real meat to this conversation. So we really want to hear your take. Obviously, 2011 until last year was a massive run up in residential real estate. And, I think it was like $13 billion was in PropTech in 2021 or some crazy number. I don't know what the exact number is, but there's been so much money poured into the industry. And then here we are today. We're in a pretty significant downturn. Obviously, interest rates, we all know the whole scenario. Where do you see PropTech going now? Like, is there going to be a lot of consolidation? Like, just give us your take. I mean, you're in this business. You are one of the major players in the residential technology space. So what's your take on all of it?
Well, let me sort of go back to first principles before I opine on the real estate tech piece exactly. I think I'm used to playing the long game. That's kind of my shtick. I come from a Central European background, and that's kind of in the DNA of those cultures, is you're trying to think for the long term. And I think in the U.S. we tend to forget that. We tend to think it's all different this time because some short-term thing has happened. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what we've gone through, particularly in the last handful of years. There was this disconnection from the realities, because the thing that doesn't change over time is human behavior. And the two characteristics I believe that make real estate so different, because I had to learn this, by the way, coming in. When I came into Moxie a decade ago, I'm like, I've serviced every industry on the planet through the other software ventures I've been a part of. I know how industries work. This shouldn't be that much different. Oh, it's very different. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think is twofold. Number one, a house is a non-fungible asset. Right? There are no two homes that are the same. And we always say that sort of casually, but if you think about that, there are very few things in life that are like that. Products and services tend to be standardized. And the second thing is it's the most emotionally and financially significant thing for the average consumer that they'll ever do. And so I think all this money that's poured in, that it's somehow going to be different this time, we're going to disrupt, and all these things that you see in the Inman headlines over the years, I think ran squarely into that. The only other industry, by the way, that I would highlight, I think everybody would know and agree, is the medical industry. Right? No two humans are the same, and it's a high stakes thing, and it's the same deal. We tolerate all kinds of things. Nobody's disrupted medicine for the same reason, right?
Right.
So the reason I give that whole backdrop to answer your question is simply to say that I feel like when too much capital pours in, and this is the other thing we're famous for doing in the U.S. and in the venture capital and private equity worlds, primarily venture capital, is all this money gets this herd mentality. We saw it in crypto, or we're seeing it now with AI, I would argue. There's too much capital too fast. And yes, it creates a lot of good experimentation, and a tiny handful of things emerge from that are worthy, but there's a tremendous amount of waste. And that's what we're seeing in PropTech right now, is my opinion, that we overcooked it, way too much capital, and now there's going to be a big fallout period, because underneath it, the industry, your industry, the real estate industry, is humming along, taking care of human beings as you always have.
It's a very fair statement. I mean, I think you could equate that to iBuying. You could equate that to power buying. These are fringe business models that you're looking at it going. I mean, Keith and I had this conversation many times. We're going, okay, if you can't make money in the fastest real estate market on the planet, where you're depreciating at double-digit numbers.
And it's the classic, we'll lose money on every one, but don't worry, we'll make it up in volume.
Right. Or we'll do capture rate on ancillary services, yet in the industry for 100 years, we haven't been able to get above a 20 to 30% capture rate, and that's a best case scenario.
I mentioned I'm a motorcycle guy. The other thing is, we in the tech industry, we want to make everything new, even if it existed for 100 years. As a motorcycle guy, I've been riding country roads forever. And for decades, I've ridden past little yard signs that say, we pay cash for houses.
Right.
It's not a new idea.
Right. And there's lots. So you basically would say that there's going to be a pullback pretty significally from venture capital into the prop. And do you think that's a short-term thing or a long-term thing? Where do you?
I think because the values in this industry are so high, I don't think it's a forever thing. This industry is always going to attract money trying to do the thing and disrupt and whatever. But I do think that these cycles, at least in my experience in past cycles like this and other tech things, when you have a pullback like what's going on right now in tech specifically, and I'm not talking just real estate tech, I'm talking about technology companies, period. It tends to create, probably a 5-year dip. There's it's not like a square wave, but I mean there's a fall off, and then it takes 5 years for things to really recover to kind of a vibrancy.
Well, that's if you think about that, Keith. It was 2008 we had the meltdown.
Yeah,
and it wasn't really in 2010, 11. It was around 11 when PropTech funding started to really start.
That's right, and it was probably not until 13 that it really started, humming. So
and some of that was a lot of this started because of. Historically, private equity, venture capital didn't love residential real estate, right? It was sort of seen as this clunky, weird, we don't really get it. But they crave arbitrage, and you didn't have to be, a nuclear physicist to realize it's either the end of the world or it's not. And if it's not the end of the world, real estate's cheap. And so it got eyeballs that it had never gotten before, because it was the first time real estate had sort of pulled us into a recession. So it got a lot of people who normally wouldn't think of it started thinking about it.
So let's talk about, you've done some acquisitions with Moxie. I think that everyone probably agrees to some extent that there's going to be a lot of consolidation in PropTech space this year and maybe even 2024. I mean, is that a fair statement? There'll be a lot of companies that have.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, one of the reasons that we sought a financial partner, keep in mind, Moxie is weird in the scheme of real estate tech companies in that, in our origin, in that we spun out from Windermere Real Estate as what was then a technology unit inside the brokerage out into the separate entity that's now Moxie. And so it wasn't until 2019 that we brought in outside capital, which is Vector Capital, that was now our financial partner. And that was deliberately because I anticipated that at some point soon, there would be a consolidation phase, and here we are, and Vector's been a great partner as we've gone through that. So I think you're absolutely spot on.
So you prowling?
So
Are you out in the market? Are you out in the market looking for things?
So I'm going to use the Marine Corps line here. Many are called, few are chosen. And by the way, I'm not a Marine, but I've always loved that line because it's about being highly selective. And that we've done 3 acquisitions in 3.5 years. To give you a sense, we haven't done 6 in a year. Right. And I think you have to be so careful. We have a good business model. We're an enterprise software company. We try our best to take great care of our customers. There's a lot of fundamentals at Moxie that are easy to dilute or even eliminate if you're too reckless in how you acquire. The thing everybody forgets is with acquisitions, and you guys know this, but for those maybe that are less familiar, the problem with acquisitions is everyone thinks that the point of value creation is the signature on the documents. That's not the end of the value creation. That's the beginning of the value creation.
That's where the work starts.
Execution there. Yes, totally right. So my point is, if you're not super thoughtful and think through how is that all going to go down, and more importantly, even more fundamental than that, is does this new company that you're trying to put into your own, how does it match your business model, and how does it match culturally? And if you don't get those two things right, and nothing's ever perfect, obviously, but if you don't spend the time thinking that stuff through, you're going to probably have a disastrous acquisition, which means a disastrous integration.
And the culture, I'm assuming, is a big piece, yeah?
Like huge piece. Yeah. Huge piece.
And people are people, it's no different than the same thing if you're a real estate broker looking at doing a roll-up or a merger. Right. It is hand in glove the same. Like cultures have to be similar. Just because you can buy something or merge with someone doesn't mean you should, right? And so really
the spreadsheet, totally, Keith, the spreadsheet doesn't give you that answer. Right. It may look great on the spreadsheet, but humans are humans, and like I like to joke too, wouldn't business be so easy were it not for the humans? It's all about the humans at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that it's smart for brokers and agents? I mean, so I'm prefacing this with, I remember 2008 running a large regional franchise. Keith was running another major real estate company in the same area at the time. We had a lot of cocktails together during that time frame.
a lot of cocktails and honesty. Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, good times.
But what I was going to get at was there was a lot of companies that didn't, a lot of PropTech companies that didn't make it. And one of the things that I was very cognizant of was trying to make sure that the software products we were using had a strong balance sheet.
Yep.
And I tell people this a lot, that it's great to have the new and exciting tool and the newest thing on the market, but a lot of these companies they're not generating revenue yet. And, if venture capital pulls back, these companies won't be here.
Totally.
And then you're out, like all of a sudden this thing is gone. But in fairness, 2008 was tough, and I think it's a very different market than what we're in today, obviously, for very different economic factors. But I worry about that, if I'm being honest. I think there's a lot of really great startups where I'm like, this is a great idea, and I go, I don't think you'll be here in 6 months, because no one's gonna. This is not a. I guess what I'm gonna say is this is a nice to have product, but not a need to have product.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So when we started our product strategy a decade ago now at Moxie, because with the spin out, when I showed up a decade ago, Windermere was the only customer, and there were no externally go to market products at that time. So we created a product strategy exactly around what you just said: need to have, not nice to have. First element. The second element is try and aim for the fundamentals of sphere marketing, because that's the durable piece, right? That's the other thing nobody's willing to talk about. What's happened to lead gen and lead gen related PropTech in the last 12 months, right? It's falling off a cliff for similar reasons. So the durable thing, focusing on the durable behaviors and the need to have technologies that support those durable behaviors. I think that's, if you're a potential customer of, or an existing customer of some technology, think of it through that lens. Is this something that people have to have and that supports the core ways in which they actually do business? Because if the answer is no to either of those, you're right, James. It's likely they're not going to be around. And the other thing to understand, you guys understand this, but again, for the audience, maybe there's a big lag effect, because when you have so much capital that comes in, balance sheets in these startups are very strong, or they look strong, but entrepreneurs often struggle, and it's understandable. Nobody likes to cut, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur. You're all about grow, grow, grow. Right. And I speak as an entrepreneur, by the way, on this. I'm highly sympathetic and empathetic. But the reality is that entrepreneurs will wait too long to cut, and their balance sheets will run slim, and then it's too late, right? Then you're in the death spiral, and that's that. And we're going to see a lot of that because of that lag. I think we're going to see a lot of that. We haven't seen much yet, to be honest. I think we're going to see it starting in the back half of this year and into 24. I think you said that earlier, James. That's when we're going to see it really.
Well, to me, it's like the opportunity of, if people freak out about the real estate market, and I'm like, man, this is the time to get aggressive.
Oh yeah,
this is the time to go be a monster and just.
But yeah, quality oriented, as I said a minute ago, right? Just because it looks good on paper or it's quote unquote a deal, you still have to integrate it and make it work.
Yeah,
York, you said something in passing that I want to unpack a little. York, you mentioned the change in lead gen, and I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm going to ask you, what do you mean by the change in lead gen?
Sure. I think, I just feel like there's so much hype that has been put into the system in the last decade by PropTech around lead gen that somehow magically we're going to finally solve the 1% conversion rate around leads in this business. And that's what I'm referring to. And I think, if there's one criticism I would level at the real estate industry, it's that I don't know that there's the same level of business discipline that you see in many other industries. Agreed. And the consequence of that is that when the market is cooking, as it has been now for quite a while, people get, for lack of a better term, sloppy. In other words, they spend money on things without really evaluating the ROI. And I think lead gen is a good example of that. And it kind of goes back to where I started. How many people fill out a form for a special deal on an open heart surgery? Yeah. I don't think that happens, right? No, you want to know and see and touch and feel and feel really good about the doc that's going to be carving you open. Yeah. And I feel like real estate, while the stakes aren't quite that high, but it's similar, right? So over 80% of the business, provable, we have the data, over 80% of agents' business comes from their sphere of influence, and the lead gen converts at 1% still in the aggregate, even though countless billions have been spent there by Zillow and others. And by the way, I'm not saying it's not a component of the industry. It is, and I think many teams are able to make that work.
They do a good job on it.
There's this inherent
broad swath.
Yeah.
does not.
There's this inherent disconnect between the race to the top of the funnel, right? And
That's right.
If you're a brilliant humanist but a average business person, you're much better at late funnel, right? Because that is when the client needs another human to shepherd them through the process. And so we have an industry that tends to be late funnel centric, skill set focused, and there's been this race to the top of the funnel where many just aren't wired, built, or good at handling that piece of it.
Right. And yes, and I would further stipulate that that's why the sphere, when you combine the sort of high stakes nature of it and the fact that the average consumer knows 10 agents, but picks 4 out of 5 pick the first one they talk to when the time comes, that's all evidence of how important this transaction is to them and how much they trust the person, right? So that's all low funnel behavior. The good news is the average agent has 400 people in their sphere of influence. So they already have a funnel. So you don't need to go generate one. You have one.
Right.
Just go work it. And by the way, here's my proof point on this. Bit of an anecdote, and this is several years ago, but I was talking with a Windermere agent here in Seattle and just chewing the fat about their business, this and that. And they're like, well, I got listed this property and blah, blah, blah. And it's the co-founder of Redfin. The co-founder of Redfin listed with a Windermere agent, right?
Oh, yo.
But that was actually common. I heard that a lot, actually. Yeah.
Sure. So
but
my point is
tape.
all
There's
the fancy schmancy.
Yeah, mark that tape. There's our cut. There's our cut.
There you go. But all the fancy schmancy lead gen, tech, blah 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 shit in the world isn't gonna change a relationship like that, right?
Agree.
So
yeah.
Let's just use a basic number. Go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
No, we just get distracted, right? I think especially to your point, York, in the go-go days, right, when deals are flowing, rather than sort of continue to do the boring trench digging, foundation pouring, we want to go vertical with our business and do some new shiny thing that everyone will see, right? At where the real value is in that bedrock, that trench digging, that foundation pouring of your business.
Bingo. And I think it's human behavior, right? We're all fundamentally at some level lazy, and so we want the shortcut, right? And the shortcut doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, also, I was going to say statistically, we average around about 5.3 to 5.4 million units annually, and it's been that way for a long time.
Yes,
and yet lead gen has skyrocketed. It's like, okay, well, now there's 40 million leads per year. And I'm going, what's this? There's only the same number of people buying houses.
Yes.
Does anybody want to do the math here?
Yeah.
And those
there's something wrong with that thought process. So,
well, and it's worse even than what you say, because those leads get sold multiple times. Right. So it's well over 100 million lead instances. So it's foolishness.
Yeah. No, there's an element of that. I remember Rich Barton was talking, and I love Rich. I think he's brilliant. Just for disclaimer,
for sure.
He's absolutely amazing. But he made this comment when talking about iBuying originally, which they obviously exited, about how it was going to create a market. I'm like, I don't think there's enough money you could print to create a market like that. And eventually he pulled out because he was like, it ain't going to work. So,
but here's my other pro tip. Okay, so this is more for a realtor. If you want to build your business and you're sphere minded, all you got to do is one simple thing, and that is do annual property reviews for the people in your sphere.
Oh, God,
drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Dude, my wife and I have done more than 20 transactions. We're not some investors, just as we've done life and worked with our parents and the usual
We've
stuff,
seen your resume and all the jobs you've had. Like you've moved around quite a bit.
Right. So my point is, I don't know how many realtors we've used in that time, but it's at least half a dozen. Not a single one of them one time has done a annual property review for us post, once we've owned one of the properties they sold.
Yeah.
And that is such a proven way to get business. And my stipulation, James, is that is probably the only way in which we could expand that 5-point-something million that you referenced, the annual amount of transactions.
Yeah.
My thesis is, if every agent did that, what it would do is cause people to think sooner about a transaction than they otherwise would. Right? It's those fundamental behaviors that we have to do, not some bullshit lead gen thing that,
there'd be a lot less agents.
And
like that's the whole funny thing. I had this conversation recently, and then we'll go on to our a couple more questions before we get you out of here. But it's like if everybody wants to get rid of the online portals, it's such an easy way to do it. I'm not advocating this for clarity. I'm just saying if you want it, if everyone's sick and tired of real estate portals, there's one way to get rid of them. Follow up with your client on an annualized basis. So they come back to you when they want to buy a house again, and they won't go to a portal and they won't become a lead. And then essentially the portals have no business. By the way, they know this. This is why they're trying to find what we're calling the long tail portion of the follow up. Everyone's on this game now, is 7 to 10 years out. If we were to, as an industry, figure that out, like just stay in touch with your client, get them to come back to you, there is no online portals anymore because they're just going to call the realtor that they forgot about 7 years later.
You don't even have to want to. You don't even have to want to get rid of them. You can just want to build your business. Ignore them and go continue to follow up with your client, build an enduring business, and then they're going to do what they're going to do. Compete with them and win anyway. Yeah. All right, I think we got time for one more.
All right, so let's do one more. So I want to ask you, and I'm going to kind of do this. I'm going to put two together. So one is the coolest. I know we said like watch new tech companies, but what's the coolest piece of technology? And don't say ChatGPT, or I swear to God, I'll get on a plane and come
I wouldn't. Trust me.
So like the coolest piece of technology that you're like, this is really, really interesting, and then piggyback that as a closing out on the intersection between technology and the realtor in the future. Just kind of like put all that into one sort of closing statement for us.
Sure. So I think, and I haven't seen it yet. I've seen attempts at it, including our own, and that is, and it does benefit from machine learning, but that would be the assistant to the realtor. I personally believe that AI is being misapplied and hyped in such a crazy way, right? I've seen these hype cycles over and over and over in my 40-year tech career now. It's ridiculous amount of hype. And again, we're creating the same problem we started this podcast with, which is too much money pouring into too many companies, most of which will fail. But I'll get off my soapbox. I do think where it can be interesting is with the agent. Why? A consumer has a very high bar, right? Any consumer can tell when something is AI generated, pretty much. Right? Sure. And it may be good and it may be acceptable, but you can tell it's not a human for the most part. Whereas at the agent level, an agent will tolerate that a lot better if it's valuable to them. So our focus is on applying that kind of stuff at the agent level. And I think that's where it goes in the future. Why? Because we talked about it on this podcast. The real estate process is a human process. It's a non-fungible asset, high stakes, highly emotional. That's not going to change. But I think the brokerage model is such that staff has been reduced over time and assisting is less, services are fewer. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the role that technology, the technology-enabled agent in the future is not going to be that they have to be some geeked out, computer-centric person. It's that the technology will come alongside them, as they are today already with CRM and things, but in a much more fluid and easily digested way and proactive way. Most technology is reactive. And by the way, I'm saying this for Moxie too. And we have our notifications and things that we point out and so on to the agent. But we can do a lot more, I think, to really come alongside as a true assistant kind of function to that agent and then automatically do things with their permission on their behalf, not out here randomly doing things without their knowledge, which is what most AI is trying to do.
Interesting. Keith, unpack that for us. I know you'll have some thoughts on that, especially since you've researched a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, York and I are in violent agreement, which makes for boring podcasts, but I will add to it. I think it's really about, yes, we could probably take ChatGPT or some piece of AI, and if it's a fill-in-the-blank contract, right, we could probably teach it pretty quickly how to review a residential real estate contract, right? So that wouldn't be terribly hard. That's also not, it's an important step in the process, but there's a handful of pieces in which you really need that agent to advise. You really need that agent to provide massive value. So it's more about what price should I offer, right? AI is not going to be able to help you with that, with the emotional aspect of, what if I lose this house in a multiple offer situation, and navigating the waters of how to set price. So I just use the contract as an example. It'll be really easy to explain what AI to explain what inspection contingency removal means and how that works in a given state. You could have it spit that out quickly. It can't yet, anyway. I haven't seen it anywhere near close. Give really thoughtful, powerful, impactful advice in the moments and in the key pieces that are needed.
Got it.
Totally. And the final comment I would add, Keith, I agree with you completely that people need to understand about it. It's a function. It's not magic. It doesn't have this knowledge inherently of all these things. It's just scraping the internet for its knowledge.
Right.
And we all know the cesspool it is the internet, right? There's great stuff and crap out there. And so, of course, it's going to be a reflection of all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's not magic.
The internet I like to call the dumpster fire. So
yes,
it's like social media.
Yeah.
I always love this idea of, and we'll wrap up here on AI, just thinking, I love the concept, York, of, an agent's running late, their phone can tell that they're going to be missing the appointment. They're going to be 15 minutes late. It reaches out to their client because they're attached to the calendar and it notifies them automatically. I'm running 15, like it's that kind of stuff, right? It's it's the assistance side where it's a remote workforce, but it's helping them through their day. And that's just intelligence. I love that analogy, York, of just like the intersection between the two of how that agent looks in the future. And it's not going to replace something we can all agree on this pod that the agent is a very instrumental part of that transaction, but technology can help them be more efficient.
That's it. Exactly.
Great. Here's the app called. It's called Realtor Standard Time. And basically it helps them stay on time versus Realtor Standard Time, right? There's the name of the product. So
there you go.
All right.
On that.
Well, York, thanks for being here so much. We appreciate it. We love the dialogue. Can't wait to have another one of these in a cocktail, in a bar with some cocktails at Inman or another event. If anybody wants to get in touch with York, his contact information is in the description. And we look forward to having you on again in the future. Thanks again, York.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, we want you to subscribe to this podcast, but the good news is if you subscribe now, you'll never have to subscribe to any other podcast ever again.